He looked normal, spoke softly, even smiled when you passed him in the hallway. But inside his apartment was something that no human mind should ever imagine. From 1978 to 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer, the man now infamously known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, committed some of the most grotesque crimes in modern American history. 0.17 lives lost, a city scarred, and a justice system that ignored cries for help. This isn't just the story of a serial killer. It's the story of how race, poverty, homophobia, and police negligence allowed a monster to hide in plain sight. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. From the outside, the Dahmer family was a picture of suburban life. But inside, things were crumbling. Joyce battled severe mental illness and substance abuse. Lionel, a research chemist, was distant and often absent. As a child, Jeffrey was quiet but obsessed with death. By age 10, he collected dead animals, dissected them, and stored their remains in jars of formaldehyde. At age 14, he began fantasizing about dominating and possessing unconscious men. By 17, he was drinking heavily and completely isolated. Then came his first kill. June 1978, just 3 weeks after graduating high school. Dahmer picked up Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker. After drinking together, Dahmer bludgeoned him with a dumbbell, dismembered the body, and buried the remains in the backyard. And just like that, a serial killer was born. But the world wouldn't hear from Dahmer again for nearly a decade. After the first murder, Dahmer tried to suppress his urges. He enrolled in Ohio State University, dropped out after 1 semester, and joined the U.S. Army as a combat medic. But his drinking problem led to his discharge in 1981. From there, he drifted between Miami, Ohio, and back to Milwaukee, struggling to hold jobs, drinking constantly and living with his grandmother. But the urges never left. 1987. Nearly 9 years after Stephen Hicks, Dahmer killed again. He met Stephen Twomey at a bar and rented a hotel room. When Dahmer woke up, Twomey was dead. Dahmer had no memory of killing him but disposed of the body nonetheless. The spree had begun. From 1987 to 1991, Dahmer would murder 16 more victims, nearly all of them young men of color. He targeted the marginalized Black, Latino, Southeast Asian, and gay men. His method was chillingly consistent. Lure men to his apartment with offers of cash for nude photos, drug them with sleeping pills or laced drinks, strangle them. Sometimes, while they were still unconscious, perform necrophilic acts, dismember, photograph, and preserve their bodies. His apartment became a graveyard. Skulls on shelves, hearts and livers in the fridge. 57-gallon vat of acid for dissolving flesh. Polaroids showing gruesome staged poses. He even attempted lobotomies, drilling into victims' skulls and injecting hydrochloric acid or boiling water, hoping to create zombie-like slaves. One victim, 14-year-old Konarak Synthosemphone, briefly escaped. Naked and bleeding, he ran into the street. Neighbors called 911, but police returned him to Dahmer, believing they were lovers. Within an hour, Konarak was dead. Let's stop here. How did he get away with this? Despite living in a heavily populated apartment complex with frequent smells of rot, power tools buzzing late at night, and neighbors hearing screams, the police did nothing. Why? Because many of Dahmer's victims were from marginalized backgrounds, because many were immigrants, Black or gay, and because the police often treated missing persons cases with indifference, especially in Milwaukee's LGBTQ+ and minority communities. Konarak's brother Anouk had also been molested by Dahmer in 1988. That should have made Dahmer a registered sex offender, but instead, he was let off with probation. Dahmer admitted years later, "Greater than I knew, no one would come looking for them. On July 22, 1991, victim Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old black man, escaped Dahmer's apartment after being threatened with a knife. He flagged down 2 Milwaukee officers. They entered apartment 213. And what they found was worse than any horror movie. Human heads in the fridge and freezer-a filing cabinet of photographs of dismembered body, human heart, and liver-a skull boiling on the stove-a shrine of bones, candles, and black spray paint. Footage, archived crime scene photos, blurred for sensitivity. Dahmer was arrested on the spot. His calm demeanor was chilling. He confessed everything in a matter-of-fact tone, saying, "Greater than I created this horror, and it only makes sense I do everything to put an end to it." In January 1992, Dahmer stood trial. He pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. The jury disagreed. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive, life terms, 957 years in prison. The courtroom was packed daily. Victims, 8 families gave heart-wrenching statements. The most famous came from Rita Isbell, sister of victim Errol Lindsay. Her emotional breakdown mid-testimony became one of the most iconic moments in true crime history. Insert dramatized voice, audio recreation. "I don't want to ever see your face again. I hope you burn in hell." On November 28, 1994. Just over 2 years after his sentencing, Dahmer was murdered in prison by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver. Using a metal bar from weight equipment, Scarver later said God told him to do it. Dahmer was found with his head bludgeoned, his body lying in a pool of blood. Even in death, Dahmer's legacy looms. In 2022, Netflix's Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, sparked record-breaking viewership, but also criticism. Victims' families said they were never consulted, and the show re-traumatized them. Hollywood has produced books, documentaries, podcasts, and merch turning a killer into an anti-hero. But we must remember, behind every headline was a real person, with dreams, families, futures. This wasn't just a story of a killer. It was the story of how society failed to listen, how the voiceless were silenced, and how the most horrific crimes can grow in the shadows of ignorance, neglect, and fear. Let the names of the 17 victims never be forgotten. Stephen Hicks, Stephen Twomey, James Dockstader, Richard Guerrero, Anthony Sears, Raymond Smith, Edward Smith, Ernest Miller, David Thomas, Curtis Strotter, Errol Lindsay, Tony Hughes, Connor Ack, Cynthia Semphone, Matt Turner, Jeremiah Weinberger, Oliver Lacey, Joseph Braidhoft. Share this video. Let their stories be louder than his. You're watching the Crime Stream. Subscribe for documentaries that tell the full truth.